Welcome. Today, we're going to take a tour of the most complex and, honestly, incredible machine you'll ever own, your own mind. We're going to break down the fundamental cycle that runs everything you think, feel, and do.
I mean, really think about it. You see a green light, you hit the gas. You hear a joke, you laugh. What happens in that split second? There is an entire universe of activity firing off between stimulus and response, and that's exactly what we're going to map out today.
Okay, so let's dive in. The core idea here is that your mind isn't some static thing. It's a process, a nonstop, continuous loop. As you can see, it's pretty simple on the surface. You sense the world, you analyze what's happening, you decide what to do, and then you act. And of course, that action changes the world, which gives you new stuff to sense. It just keeps going and going. So, here's our roadmap for this journey. We're going to walk through 6 key stages. We'll start with how you even let the world in, then how you save bits of it for later. After that, we'll see how you build your current reality, who's running the show up there, how you make the final call, and, well, what gives you that final push to actually do something.
First things first, getting information into the system. Look, the world is just bombarding you with information every single second of every day. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. So how does your brain not just short circuit? It all starts with one crucial skill: attention.
I think the best way to wrap your head around attention is to think of it as a spotlight. In a dark room full of stuff, you can only really see what the spotlight is pointing at. It brings one thing into sharp focus, while everything else just kind of fades into the background. Your brain can't possibly process everything at once. So this spotlight is basically your mind's bouncer, deciding what gets past the velvet rope.
And this spotlight isn't just an on or off switch. It has different modes. You've got selective attention. That's you trying to hear your friend in a super loud restaurant. You've got divided attention, which is what we all think we're doing when we text and walk. And then there's this really cool one, executive control, which is when you turn that spotlight inward to focus on your own thoughts.
But here's the catch, and it is a big one. As powerful as this spotlight is, it's also incredibly narrow. When you're laser focused on one thing, you can be completely blind to another, even if it's staring you right in the face. It's called inattentional blindness. It's the reason a driver can look right at a cyclist and still pull out in front of them. Their eyes saw it, but the spotlight of attention was pointed somewhere else.
All right, so once the spotlight has landed on a piece of information, what's next? Well, your brain's got to figure out if this is something worth keeping. And that brings us to the fascinating world of learning and memory.
So to get something to stick in your long-term memory, it's not enough to just see it once. First, obviously you have to pay attention to it, but then comes the really critical step: elaborate rehearsal. This isn't just repeating a phone number over and over. It's about connecting that new information to the web of things you already know. The more connections you make, the stronger the memory. Then, finally, your brain does this thing called consolidation, often when you're sleeping, where it basically cements those connections into place.
You know, this leads to a really cool phenomenon. Have you ever heard a song and bam, you're instantly transported back to your high school prom? That's encoding specificity in action. Your memories aren't filed away like boring text files. They're tangled up with the context, the place, the mood, the sounds of when you made them. It's why it's often easier to ace a test if you take it in the same room where you studied. Okay, so we're letting information in, and we're storing some of it for later. But your mind is way more than just a dusty library of facts, right? It's actively using that information to build a coherent picture of what is happening right here, right now. And the place where all that happens is your working memory.
I absolutely love this workbench metaphor. Seriously, working memory isn't storage. It's the active, conscious mental space where you're juggling ideas. When you're trying to figure out a tip at a restaurant or follow the plot of a movie or put together IKEA furniture, you're using your working memory. It's where you hold all the pieces and move them around to see how they fit.
Whoa, okay, this diagram looks a little intense, I know. But don't worry about all the arrows and boxes, just focus on that central part labeled workspace. Think of that as Grand Central Station for your mind. It's the meeting point where brand new information coming from your senses gets mixed together with old knowledge you pull up from long-term memory. It is literally the spot where conscious thought is built. So what's the end product of all this work? Well, your brain uses this workbench to build something called a situation model, which is really just a fancy way of saying it creates a story, a constantly updated narrative of what's going on and why. It's your internal movie of who is doing what to whom, and this story is always being edited in real time as new info comes in. Okay,
So we've got this active workbench and this movie of reality playing in our heads. But who's the director? Who decides what to focus on? This brings us to the management layer of the mind, your executive functions.
The easiest way to think about this is that your brain has two basic operating modes. System 1 is your fast, automatic, gut reaction thinking. It's what instantly tells you 2 plus 2 is 4, no effort required. Then you have System 2. That's your slow, deliberate, analytical thinking. It's the one you have to consciously fire up to solve, say, 17 times 24. System 1 is the autopilot, System 2 is the pilot who has to grab the controls and actually fly the plane.
And this diagram shows us how those two systems work together. Your brain almost always starts with a fast, intuitive answer. That's what this model calls T1, our System 1. But it doesn't just stop there. It's also monitoring that answer. And if something feels a bit off or the stakes are high, it can hit the brakes and activate a more effortful, analytical process, T2, our System 2, to double-check the work. It's like having a built-in fact-checker for your own gut feelings.
And what is that process that does the checking? It has a name. Metacognition. It literally means thinking about thinking. It's the mind's CEO, the one overseeing the whole operation. Metacognition is what lets you realize you're confused or that you need to try a different strategy to solve a problem. It's the part of you that decides if a gut feeling is good enough, or if it's time to slow down and switch on that heavy-duty System 2.
All right, let's keep this going. With all this amazing machinery in place, your reality model is built, your thinking systems are running, it's finally time to actually make a choice. But as we all know from personal experience, this process is, well, it's not always perfectly logical, is it? So our fast, intuitive System 1 thinking is amazing because it's so efficient. But to get that speed, it uses a ton of mental shortcuts, and sometimes those shortcuts lead us down some very predictable paths to the wrong answer. We call these cognitive biases. This table's full of them. Let's just pick one. The spotlight effect. You know that feeling when you have a bad hair day and you're convinced that every single person is staring at your head? That's it. In reality, pretty much nobody notices because they're all too busy worrying about the spotlight they think is on them.
And here we are, the final stage of our journey. We've perceived the world, we've understood it, we've made a decision, but there's one last absolutely crucial step, turning a decision into an actual physical action. What is it that gives us that final push?
Turns out, it's really a two-part process. On the left, you see where it all starts, motivation. This is basically a quick calculation your brain does. If I try this, will I succeed? And if I succeed, is the reward worth it? That's the why. But that's just an idea. On the right, we see the how. That's volition or willpower. This is where you actually commit, make a real plan, and, as the model says, cross the Rubicon. You go from just wanting to do something to actually intending to do it. It's the point of no return.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. We've journeyed all the way from sensing the world to paying attention, remembering, understanding, reasoning, deciding, and finally acting. And every single action you take puts a new ripple into the world, which gives you new information to sense and kicks off this powerful, continuous cycle all over again.
So, I want to leave you with one final thought. You've just seen the basic blueprint of your own mind. Now that you know about the spotlight of attention, the workbench of working memory, the two dueling systems of thought, what part of your own cognitive cycle are you going to shine your own spotlight on? Thanks so much for joining me on this tour.